Alan, very welcome.
I'm delighted to be here.
Home in California?
I am, yes, recovering from Oakmont. That was quite a week.
Was this a good US Open?
It was a great US Open. I mean, what you want are players to be losing their minds, pushed to the breaking point, physically, emotionally, spiritually. We saw a lot of that. Um, you had five guys tied for the lead on the back nine. You had the number one player in the world on the leaderboard. You had, some big time talent and John Rahm and Victor Hovland sniffing around. And ultimately, you had an all time underdog story who produced an indelible moment on the 72nd green. I mean, I'm not sure what more you could really ask for.
And were people enjoying it throughout? Because on Thursday, Friday in particular, we say even just, anecdotally and otherwise emails into the podcast, we had quite a few people saying, Oakmont's really boring. This is drudgery.
It's supposed to be boring. It's the United States Open. The Masters is about drama and about, pyrotechnics, and the Open Championship is about creativity and shot making and surviving the elements that are always changing. The US Open is supposed to be a grind. It's supposed to be boring. It's a war of attrition. It's brutality. And if you don't like that, then just watch this week's, tournament in Connecticut when 25 under is going to win. But for 1 week a year, we get an absolutely suffocating golf course. We have the players are bleeding to death out there, and it's glorious. And if you don't like that, then you just don't like the U.S. Open.
I think it's exposed you low level hate these guys, really. It's like a certain revenge for all the bad interviews.
Well, it's that's something Scotty Scheffler said that oh, you guys just like to watch us look like you out there, and it's not. I mean, sure, there's a morbid pleasure in watching the best golfers in the world struggle, but it's more about how are they going to handle it, because it's such an examination of their mental toughness and their fortitude. And so it's not so much about wanting to watch the pros hit bad shots. It's about wanting to see if they can overcome that. Like, who has the toughness to keep going and to play through it? And in the end, not many guys do. And that's why it's so compelling.
Yeah. Suffocating is a great word for it that you used. I wasn't a huge fan of it really for most of the week. I thought once the rain came in on Saturday and softened it up a touch, we saw a great 2, 3 hours on Saturday evening. Really loved that golf. Perfect kind of challenge. And then Sunday, like the chaos was just kind of irresistible. Even though certain
Yes.
players got screwed, like Sam Burns, I would say, is still fuming over not getting a ruling at one stage and one or two other moments which went against him. But on Thursday, Friday, if you compare it with Pinehurst, for instance, I just found the rough around the green too much. I thought it kind of took away so much craft that so many of these players would have. Like you just have to open out loft and have a hack and a degree of luck as well. And I thought the rough, I mean, I know it's a US Open, but it was just so severe in the fairways. It did make it a grind even to watch guys hacking out and just sitting through shot after shot of a wedge from fairway or from rough off fairway. So I wasn't sure about it, and I wasn't sure it was the fairest test of all time.
Well, I disagree a little bit. I mean, week to week, there's almost no penalty for driving the ball crooked in professional golf anymore. There just isn't. Because even if a European Tour or PGA Tour event grows a little bit of rough, these guys are hitting it so far. They only have a wedge into the green. They have enough speed. They're going to knock it on the putting surface no matter what. Oakmont just asked a very fundamental question. Can you hit a fairway? It is a dying art in the sport. And many players failed the test. And that's it. That's why they were that's why they were so frustrated, because they couldn't play their normal game. You actually had to adapt. You had to figure it out. And these guys couldn't do it. So um, I agree, long rough around the greens does take away a little artistry of the game. But again, you know, we have shaved banks and we have close crop turf at Augusta. We're gonna have it at the Open. You know, even Valhalla for the PGA Championship had a lot of runoffs, and we've seen that tests. the, the the players have been able to exhibit their recovery skills many times. This was a different test. Can you hit a fairway? Can you hit a green? And if you cannot, you're going to pay a very steep price. And um, yes, if you're in the rough, you had to knock it out. But then what comes next? That's where it gets interesting. Can you get up and down from 90 yards to save par? Can you make a 20-footer when you absolutely have to because you missed the green, you knocked it out? Um, these guys are so skilled. They can usually hit it stone dead from any lie. So this was a chance to like just test them in a totally different way. And I agree. I wouldn't want to watch it every week.
Mm.
That might get a little oppressive. But for 1 week for the U.S. Open, I mean, I loved it.
Fair, yeah. I'll meet you halfway in that. It's quite a nuanced point because there's quite probably a difference between the viewing experience and then the test. So it's very hard to argue against your point that finding a fairway is a dying art. So let's make these guys find a fairway. And so as a challenge, I kind of like, wow, I couldn't disagree with that. But on the viewing experience, especially on a Thursday, Friday, where you're stuck with featured groups, and quite a lot of the time they're not the players in form, therefore they're missing a lot of fairways, therefore you're watching a lot of this drudgery. It's not the most enjoyable experience Thursday, Friday. But once you get to Saturday, Sunday, and you get the better guys playing well, it's a more enjoyable TV event then. And that's that there's a real, in my mind, with a US Open like this, there's, from a watching perspective, there's a huge difference between featured groups Thursday, Friday. Shane Lowry hates this course more than life itself, and then guys who are playing well at the weekend.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's a classic case. I mean, you know, Shane lost his mind out there, and therefore was packing up on Friday afternoon. Like the course broke him. That's how it was designed. And JJ Spawn had a great attitude all week long, and every time he got a bad break, he just kind of smiled and said, "Okay, I'm going to try and save par." You know, you watch that front nine on the final round, and Spawn hits the pin on number two, doesn't even react. He's just like, "Okay, let's keep playing golf." And um, these players are used to overpowering a golf course. The game comes so easy to them. This is a different test,
Mm.
not just of their golfing skill, but like who they are as humans. And the guy with the best attitude won, and I think that tells you something.
Yeah. We would have seen, obviously, JJ Spawn at the Players this year. He's having a very good year. He's 34 years of age. Do you suspect this guy's likely to have a sustained run at it now, or hard to tell? What's your gut?
I mean, he's a finesse player in a power game, so there's always going to be weeks where he's just really has no chance to win. Maybe he can compete and finish eighth, but um, he's just given up so much to the Rorys and the Brysons of the world off the tee that everything the rest of his game has to be absolutely immaculate to have a chance. But now, like Sawgrass, where he pushed Roy to the brink, that's a finesse golf course. So he's going to be dangerous on certain courses and certain setups. And we'll see. Brian Harmon obviously had a great win at the Open. He kind of JJ Spawn sort of fits that profile. A good veteran, had a great week. Probably never going to be a dominant force, but Spawn's gonna be on the Ryder Cup team. Maybe he's gonna be a fan favorite. I think he can build a really nice career. I don't think he's going to dominate the game, but you need the JJ Spawns there to add variety, to add kind of a human element to these superheroes they're competing against.
Speaking of people losing their minds, as you do with majors, you watch all the pre-tournament stuff on YouTube, and I got a nice tour of the locker rooms, and they've kept the benches which have the spike marks from 100 years ago, and they've kept the little locker which has, like, where during Prohibition they'd stash the liquor, and it's all, it's beautiful. Wyndham Clark thought sod this, and seems to have been accused of, anyway, of trashing the place.
Yeah, there was some photos on social media of a locker that he's alleged to have smashed. I'm sure it's true. He has kind of a history of flying off the handle, as we say here. But Oakmont hasn't confirmed it, and Wyndham hasn't spoke on it, so we don't know for sure. But the burden of proof is on Wyndham Clark at this point, because everyone just assumes he did it because it tracks with his behavior. Um, I mean, it's obviously very childish and it's very churlish, and no one's going to condone it. I was interested by the pearl clutching. I mean, people are like, he should be suspended for 6 months. They should take away his U.S. Open trophy. Like it's like, I mean, it's just a locker door. He's going to pay for it to be fixed. Um, I had a hard time getting too worked up about it. Like if he had well, no, I'm not going to say, but it's you know I mean, yeah, the Oakmont locker room is cool, but it's just a metal door. I don't see it as a crime against humanity, but it does reveal something about Wyndham Clark, and it's not very flattering.
Phil Mickelson left the property on Friday. Um, Penny for his thoughts. You've literally written the book, his US Open relationship. Very painful one in the year where Rory McIlroy completes the career Grand Slam.
Yeah, you could see how hard Phil was grinding on Friday to make the cut. I mean, you could see the strain on his face. Like he knew it. He didn't want to go out the way he did, and he gave himself a shot. He had a putt on the last hole to make the cut, and I mean, the guy's 55. It's that he's even still hanging around and beating half the field. Essentially, it's impressive, and of course, it's always going to be the one that got away. It's defined him in as much as his Masters wins have, and this may not be the end. The USGA, they gave him a special exemption in 2021. He wound up not needing it because a month before the U.S. Open, he won the PGA Championship. So, um, the thing about Phil is he's box office, and the USGA is not immune to market forces. And so, of course, next year's U.S. Open is at Shinnecock. Phil's always had a big following in the New York area. Um, he had his heart broken there in 2004. He probably should have won that. Well, he definitely should have won that U.S. Open. And yeah, I mean, he told me that was the best golf he's ever played. And the greens were out of control, and Retief Goosen just managed to beat him. But I wouldn't be shocked if he got another go at it at Shinnecock. I could see that, and they could maybe quietly make it known this is it. This is the swan song, and kind of send him off with a little more pomp. But Phil's a polarizing figure, obviously, and he may have his detractors within the USGA, and we'll see if that comes to pass.
Yeah. It was at Shinnecock where he hit the ball when it was moving as well, wasn't it?
That's the other thing. That's the strike against him, because if Phil comes back, that clip's going to be played over and over, and the kind of highlights out another setup screw up by the USGA. So that definitely works against him.
When you say he's a polarizing figure, is he still, to your eye, embraced as warmly by fans on the course when he's playing a typical US Open?
No, I mean it's muted.
Right.
He's definitely lost a subset of golf fans forever because of his advocacy for live golf, and fairly or unfairly, Phil's going to be remembered as a guy who broke golf in a lot of ways. He was the highest profile player to go to live behind the scenes. As I made pretty clear in my book Live and Let Die that he was a driving force behind the creation of live golf in so many ways. And so the traditionalists and the old school PGA Tour fans are never going to forgive him for that. So I couldn't say what percentage it is, but it's not minuscule. He's lost golf fans forever,
Yeah.
but there's still plenty of goodwill for Phil, as for all the thrills that he gave us in the sport, and for all the autographs he signed, and um, I think there's a different portion of the fan base has kind of come around and said he's a maverick. He does it his own way. I like the cut of his jib, and so I think that he's always going to have his hardcore supporters, but there's fewer of them now than there used to be.
Yeah, I guess he's lost that more casual fan. Because I wasn't sure what to make of him going around there. Slightly more muted reaction, leaving on the Friday, and like, God, that, your point about next year notwithstanding, but the US Open dream officially over, stuck on three, and like kind of a diminished figure, almost I was going to say a sad figure, but that feels a little too much. But if you were to ask me 7, 8 years ago, or Kiowa even, Phil Mickelson, you know, I was like, "Well, this guy's going to spend the next 20 years just being worshipped everywhere he goes. It's going to be so warm. It's like it's going to be the longest lap of honor you've ever seen, and it's very very different so quickly."
For sure. And that will be in stark relief when we get to Bethpage for the Ryder Cup, because that was always going to be Phil's captaincy. He's beloved around Bethpage. He was sort of the perfect age, the perfect time in his career. Like, there was zero doubt that he would be the captain. Zero. Um, by going to Live Golf, he gave that up. You fast forward 10 years from now, whatever, he was going to be the honorary starter at the Masters with Tiger. And, that was going to be as much juice as Jack and Arnie in its own way. And, he's probably given that up as well. He could have been in the broadcast booth next to Jim Nance and had a commanding voice in the game. He gave that up too. Like, um, so it's, yeah, to your point, Joe, it's like he's definitely diminished. I think that's a good word. Just his profile, there, I don't, I don't know many people who watch the Live Golf streams, and he's had no individual success there. His team has never even won, a single event. It's been a very quiet goodbye.
Yeah. And the thing about Phil is, it strikes me, he would have loved all those things you're talking about. Ryder Cup captain, little spell in the booth, pick his tournaments, but like a big voice in golf, ceremonial start at the Masters. Like he doesn't strike me as a personality that would be immune to any of that stuff. So, I mean, I guess the burning question you'd love to ask him with the truth serum is, do you think it was all worth it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate question. He might say yes. There's a big part of Phil that needed to be this agent of change. And in a lot of ways, he was right. I mean, his two biggest critiques of the PGA Tour was the players did not have enough say in their governance. And that's certainly changed. The players are absolutely running the tour now. And so, Phil was correct about that. And he felt that the players were underpaid. And you saw that as soon as Live Golf arrived on the scene, Jay Monahan just opened up the spigot and the money started to gush. And, Phil was right about that too. So um, there's a bitter irony there that, his two major talking points, there's no doubt he was correct, but it was the way he went about it. He was so sneaky, kind of in the shadows, trying to work three sides of the street simultaneously. And it was, the incredibly cynical things that he said to me that were
Mm.
in the Phil book that, sort of led to his suspension and ultimately, his exile. Like, um, if he had been more adept, if he had been a little more subtle, like he probably could have enacted the changes he wanted and been celebrated for it. But instead, he's been villainized. And so, but it's lost in all the noise. Like, Phil was right in some profound
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah. No, it has. It's true. And you don't suspect the Masters, Augusta might say, you know what, Phil, in you come. Ceremonial starter, nonetheless.
They could. I mean, we'll see what happens. Obviously, there's been this change of leadership at the PGA Tour. If if the framework agreement ever gets consummated in some way, and the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia becomes an investor in the PGA Tour, and everyone makes nice, and the game is reunified, and these on ramps are created for live players to come back to the tour, and maybe some tour guys to go over and play some live events, and the game can officially say we've survived this era and we're all friends again, and it's a better product now. That would help Phil's rehabilitation, because
Yeah.
people might say, okay, Phil took some bullets, but ultimately the sport's in a better place. We have this influx of money. The players are getting paid. They have a greater say in their governance. Like, yeah, I think Phil was actually right. And maybe I had it wrong. And okay, sure. Come on back. We'll take
Yeah.
you back. So, but if the deal completely blows up and and the sport is fractured forever, I think that reduces the chances that he will be welcomed back in these ceremonial roles.
Yeah. I suspect his best shot at redemption is to kind of Freddie Couples it a couple of years at Augusta and have great finishes and walk up 18 on Sunday. And oh my God, he's 60. And did you see the shot he pulled off in 16? And the galleries, they do their thing. And that might just help the aftertaste. And so by winning the Masters and having that route to a Tom Watson, a Turnberry-esque kind of a story, I think that's his best shot at feeling the love again. And I think actually it's very possible.
I agree with that. It was only 2 years ago he finished second.
Yeah.
Like if 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 the course is really firm and fast and fiery, I mean, Phil's still dangerous there. Um, and you're right. You could have that moment in the sun, and his longevity in the sport is flabbergasting. Maybe in the history of sport. I mean, for 30 years, he was at the front ranks of the game.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible. And so um, he's never quite gotten his due for that. And if he had one more run, like you're saying, I think that would help because
Mm.
let's face it. I mean, um, sports fans are forgiving. Like so many of the players have done so many things on and off the field, the pitch, the court. Uh, much worse than Phil's ultimate crime was really duplicity. He didn't break any laws. He wasn't charged with any crimes. He didn't go to jail. A lot of sportsmen have, and they've still been welcomed back.
Yeah.
And even Tiger Woods, his greatest rival. I mean, Tiger has had some massive controversies in his life, and he's created incredible messes that had to be cleaned up. And he's become this beloved elder statesman. And Phil's crime was maybe disloyalty, maybe greed, but it didn't rise to anything that you could be charged for. And so you think there should be a road back for him, but it's
Yeah.
complex, and the final chapter hasn't been written for Phil yet. We have to see how these things play out.
Well, listen, I will take an updated version of your book on him, which everybody should read if they haven't. It's just it's such a great read. Like I loved Phil. I kind of still I'll never be able to shake it. He was my favorite player to watch for the last 20 odd years. The 90s I don't remember as well. Like phenomenal to watch, and then such a compelling person because of that shooter McGavin. He's a complete cheeseball. Is this authentic? And then it turns out like behind the scenes, and your book's part of it. He's not that type of character at all. But he's maybe more interesting and likable. Therefore, because of it. So I just can't get enough of him. Like I a lot of the 2000s was like, is Phil as nice as he seems? And now everyone knows he's a complete rogue.
Yeah, but it's interesting because through social media and other avenues, I've heard from many people who read the book, and it's got to be close to 50-50, where half the folks said, I used to be a Phil fan, and now he's lost me forever because the way he treated Bones and the way he treated Billy Walters and the other things. But many people said, I like Phil more. Like obviously he has his flaws, but he's human, and I relate to him more. And he would previously been sort of this cartoon character, and now he's like just an actual person and that I can relate to. So yeah, to your point, it's and that was my goal with the book, was not to tell people how to feel. It was just to like present him in full, the good and the bad, and let the reader decide how they felt about him. And is a strong mix of reactions. I'll
Yeah.
say that.
Well, he's just lived a fun life, I suspect, for better or worse. Like one story I remember from the book, which has endured, and it's not even that like consequential. It just captures in a snapshot how this guy sort of lived, and it seems like lots of days were, in the standards of most of us types, ordinary enough lives, like extraordinary. And so the gist of it is, and I'll mess up the details because it's just from memory, but it's stuck in the memory. Is like it's a big day in the NFL or college. It's a big football day, and so Phil rounds up friends, celebrity friends, different people. They get on a private jet. They fly to Vegas. They get the best suite in the best hotel. There's 20 giant TVs in the room. They say we're the whole day we're gambling like degenerates. Phil at one point turns to somebody and says, "Listen, you might want to get your bet on before I make my bet because my bet's so big it's going to shift the market." And I don't know if they win, they lose, they have a great day, they get back on the jet, they're home for dinner time, and it's just like, yeah, it was a Tuesday.
Yeah, no, your recall of details is great. And no, Phil won. He won big money. I mean, we're talking into the millions off the football bets. But before they went to the jet, he wanted to play a little baccarat, and he gave almost all of it back, and he moped the whole flight home. That's like it's just unbelievable. Yeah, it's like yeah, you imagine him coming in to tuck the kids in for bed. Hi, honey, how was your day? Well, I was up 3 million at lunch, and now I got $50 left, but we had a great time. Like it's just incredible.
So off he goes, and maybe we see him next year. Before you go, Rory McIlroy. So,
Is there a question there?
where do you want to start?
Hmm. Yeah, gosh, it's fascinating. And I've spent the last year thinking about Roy McIlroy because he's gonna be my next book, and
Wow.
I'm probably 60% done. Book's due in October. It'll come out in March of 2026. So I have many thoughts about Rory. It's been fascinating to watch this existential crisis he's going through since the Masters, and um, everyone has a theory. I think there's a few things going on, and he talked about it. It's just the letdown of chasing this dream. Um, but when Phil won the Masters in 2004 to break through after a dozen years of being the best player without a major, and all the questions about him, and that was as cathartic a win as Rory's was, and Phil just kept going. I mean, he had his best year that year, and he came back and he won majors the next year and the year after. I mean, you don't have to have a huge letdown. um, uh,
If anything,
Obviously, we're better.
if anything, we thought that's what was going to happen here. The wheels are off. The wheels are, the pressure's off. You'll
Yeah,
freewheel it, etc.
yeah, that's what everyone thought for sure. Um, Rory's an emotional player, just like Phil was, and I think he's out of emotion. He just looks so flat out there on the golf course and off the golf course. Um, it's an interesting point, like this churlish version of Rory. Is this the real Rory? And for 18 years, it's been this incredible facade where he always said and did the right thing, and everyone he was so widely admired and so classy, and everyone loved him. Like we thought that was the real Rory, but was that all pretend? And now we're seeing the real Rory. I mean, it's like it makes your head spin thinking about how much he's changed in such a short period of time. I mean, I think Portrush is going to be fascinating because, and he alluded to this as he was leaving Oakmont, like if he can't summon any energy or emotion to play the Open at Portrush, the course where he shot 61 when he was 16, and that really began his legend. And after what happened, last time around when he makes 8 on the first hole on that incredible Friday when the entire, island of Ireland was cheering him on to try and make the cut, and the tears, and like if he goes back there and he's just doesn't look like he's that into it, then you really have to question what is this last act of his career going to look like.
Mm.
Clearly it would have been better for Rory if the Masters was in September
Yeah.
and he could have just taken 6 months off. Like, I can't believe he's playing this week in Connecticut. Like, I'm shocked. Like, if I'm Rory, I just say my back is tight and I got to take the week off. Like, why is he doing this to himself? Why is
Mm.
he putting himself through it? It's incredible. Um, he just looks so miserable on the golf course, and obviously it's affecting his play. Um, Quail Hollow, Rory McIlroy Country Club, like he went there with a chance to win the calendar Grand Slam, and um, I don't blame him at Oakmont. Once he got off to a bad start, like okay, he was done. But Portrush is going to be fascinating theater, and if he can dig deep and find something there. Um, but if he doesn't, I'm definitely concerned about what this means for going forward. It's
Mm.
just um,
He
what
was.
are your theories? I mean, like, what do you think is going on?
Um, Well, and I know you were sort of saying it facetiously. I certainly don't think now I'm going to be my real self facade has dropped after 20 years. Um, I find it very hard to know. It's really, really tricky to know. Like, I can understand the flatness and not being motivated. That makes
Totally.
sense. That makes sense. I find the grouchiness with the media harder to fathom. Like, there was such an outpouring of love for him. Like,
Oh,
the media to a person effectively said, "I basically cried. I couldn't have been happier." I mean, it was the most lauded win I can ever remember.
definitely.
Woods in 19, pretty amazing. But he would have just felt nothing but love from the media, I think. And he said, this week when he was asked, like, "Are you not talking to us because you're frustrated with the stuff in the golf course?" And he said, "No, I'm frustrated with you." And, he said it's not just about the driver at the USPGA League. He said, "I skipped media on Thursday." And he sort of, with this pained expression, said, "It's just the whole thing." And
Yeah.
is he sick of being scrutinized so much? I mean, well, don't listen to this podcast, Rory, but is he sick of being scrutinized so much? But then he never had a problem with that, in fairness to him, in like 10 years of being scrutinized, like, fairly viciously for his shortcomings in majors. So it's sort of strange when you win the Masters that you're like, I'm really sick of these guys. So I don't know. It's hard to disentangle the flatness with the Masters. Is he taking some of that out in the media? Is there something else with the media going on? Has he got wind that you're writing this book and he's pissed off at you? I mean, who knows?
Oh, definitely the latter, but it's not. I wasn't even in that scrum when he was saying, I'm tired of you guys. I wasn't there, so that wasn't
Oh,
about
but
me.
but then,
But
but then he said, actually, no, not you guys. Said,
yeah,
yeah, and so then I thought maybe he means Shipnook.
maybe. I mean,
I didn't know you were writing the book at that stage.
the the thing that's lost in this debate about the media, nobody cares about the tender feelings of self-important reporters. Like, that he walks by us and some guys are personally indignant. That doesn't matter. It's We are the stand-ins for the fans. Like, our job is to represent the fans and ask the questions they wish they could ask when they're at home in their living room watching this. And Rory is such a good talker. He adds so much context to what we are witnessing. And so, to I would have loved to hear his thoughts on the setup at Oakmont. We never got there because he didn't speak, and then when he did, he was so short. And um, did it take his? What was his strategies? Should he have gone to a 2 iron off the tee when his driver was
Yeah.
struggling? I mean, did he think that the course was unfair? He's so eloquent talking about just the nuts and bolts of golf, and it adds an important context to the whole event. Um, Thursday at Quail Hollow, like, Rory, were you thinking about the career Grand Slam? Was that on your mind? Did you feel a certain pressure you didn't expect to? Like, it's an entertainment product. Rory's immaculate, spectacular lifestyle doesn't exist without the golf fans. He's not flying home in a $70 million jet without the fans. And when you snub the reporters, you're really snubbing the fans. And so it's not about the press, it's about disengaging with the fan base, because we're just the conduit. Like, and
It was interesting.
it,
Whenever it's hard to keep track of all the recent press conferences, he did make the point, like, we can kind of cut out that middleman increasingly. He didn't mean it to sound like a threat, but he was kind of saying we can take out our phones and talk to the fans. So I don't
yeah,
know.
but he doesn't. That
Well,
was his
yeah,
press conference
sure,
in Canada. He's like, if I can talk about my round, yeah, on social media, but you didn't. You're not doing that.
sure.
And so, yeah, I mean, social media has definitely upended the dynamic between athlete and reporter. There's no doubt. But as you mentioned, the outpouring around the Masters, the context that so many reporters
Yeah.
were able to bring to the tale. Like, Rory doesn't have the depth of thought or the self-awareness to talk about some of these things. He's living it. He's not observing it. And all the other voices, I have incredible quotes from people throughout the golf world about what that victory meant and why it was so impactful and why it hit them so hard. And so yes, he can communicate with the fans on social media, but it's very bland, it's very sanitized, it's very shallow. You still need storytelling, you still need other voices, you still need trained professionals to give these events the context they deserve. And if Rory just clams up, he's diminishing the the moment. He's diminishing the tournament. He's diminishing his own achievements. And it doesn't serve him well, and it doesn't serve the fans well. Nobody cares about the reporters. That's not what this is about.
Sure.
It's about this, for a guy who loves golf history and for who reveres the players who've come before him and is so self-aware of where he fits into the narrative of the sport. Um, if he doesn't want to talk anymore, then he's damaging all of that in a way that hurts himself.
Yeah. If I was a betting man, if Phil was here, um, I think this is just a momentary flatness. The media thing, I don't fully understand the genesis of it, but I also suspect it's pretty temporary, and I suspect sooner rather than later, he's back to himself. I don't think this is any more than just processing the whole thing, and a sort of fatigue as well, because he's talked about how he worked so hard from October to April. He's talked about that was the period this season. I worked so hard to get ready for Augusta, and he won it. And so, like, it's the natural season finale, and he's just stuck now. Reporters and tournament and not playing that well and the driver thing. I just think it's all that. I don't think it's any more long term than that. I'd be amazed. I'd be amazed if it was.
Well, I hope you're right. I mean, because Rory's been the best talker in the game for a long time, and he's elevated the sport with his perspective, and he's made it more fun for everyone to follow on this journey. Um, the celebration around the Masters was not even so much about golf. It was an appreciation for the person and the grace that he had carried himself with, and the way he'd worn this burden, and the way he'd let us into his heart and his soul. That's why the Masters resonated so much. You know, Scotty Scheffler's victories at Augusta have been spectacular. I mean, he's played some of the best golf in history, but it doesn't have an impact because we just don't feel the connection to him. And it's no knock on Scotty Scheffler, who's a great human being, but it's the way Rory has let us in that has made people so invested in his accomplishments and his failures. And so it's been interesting to read on social media how people have quickly
Yeah.
said, I'm just I'm kind of over this guy. Like, 18 years of goodwill has in 2 months, a lot of it has been incinerated. And he can get it back, of course, but there's been this sense of letdown. It's almost taken away from some of the joy of the Masters win. When people look back on Rory this year, um, the feelings we all had in April, they've been diminished, and now there's these weird questions and this weird energy, and it's totally self-induced. And
Mm.
um, so I hope you're right that it's temporary, because it just feels like it's not as much fun as it was. Rory made it fun to be a golf fan, and it's less fun right now, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah. What can you tell us about this book?
Well, it's gonna be fun to read because I'm having fun writing it. That's always, my test. Like, as a writer, you have to be your harshest critic, because you're editing every word and every sentence as you go. And um, but I've had a lot of fun writing this. He's had a big, colorful life, and he's touched a lot of people along the way. And uh, you know, and I told this to Rory. I mean, I said this to him. It's like, the last two books I did were big and controversial and all that. Like, I'd like this to be more fun and celebratory, because I think there's a lightness to his being. If we're gonna quote Kundura, but it's like, and I think I'm not getting sucked into the recency bias of the last few months. I'm looking at the whole scale of his career, and it's there's been a lot of joy there, and it's been a lot of fun to chronicle. And I've been covering Rory pretty much his whole professional career, and I've had a lot of access at times. And so it's going to be an intimate portrait.
Right.
Um, and there's so many things that people have forgotten. Like, uh, you know, when he gets snubbed for the 2005 Walker Cup team, which he by all rights should have been on when he was 16 years old, um, and there was I talked to some of the tweety old gents who were part of that selectorial process, and they walked me through the whole thing. And then it's literally a few days later that Rory goes to Portrush and shoots
61,
61 after the team is announced,
yeah.
and the heartburn and the agita for these guys. And then they go over to Chicago Golf Club and they lose the Walker Cup by 1 point. Like, we should have taken Rory. And it's a great little chapter that just, takes two things that people kind of know about, but really
Yeah.
brings them to life in a fun way. And the blow by blow of the Portrush round is fun to recreate. And I had forgotten or never knew that that was Tuesday of the Open Championship at St. Andrews. So now you have, Darren Clark comes off his practice round. The first question's about Rory's 61, and he dashes off a text message to him, and it's just the details are so fun on some of the old stuff. And I've been inside the ropes at these biggest tournaments that he's won and lost, and going back and talking to the protagonists, the guys who were there playing with him and against him, and recreating all these events in a really fun, dynamic way. It's been great fun. I've really enjoyed this process. I still have a ways to go. I mean, it's actually a funny story because I started working on the book a year ago, and this February, so now whatever, 5 months ago, I wasn't where I wanted to be, and I had a lot of stuff going on work wise, personally, and so I called my editor at Simon and Schuster, and I said, I need another year. Like, I I just the last two books I've had this guillotine over my neck with these tight deadlines, and I just don't want to do that again. He's like, sure, no problem, whatever. And then Rory wins the Masters, and I get a text that night from my editor. It's like, type faster, book is due in October. And it's like, but um, it's been good. I needed that adrenaline. I kind of thrive on that, and I like deadlines. And that was part of the problem is there was no deadline on the book. I was just kind of farting around, and so this has definitely gotten me focused. And the writing has been coming really fast, which also is a good sign. Like, the pace at which I'm typing tells me about my engagement level. And if I'm writing a Thursday story from the PGA Championship, sometimes it's a struggle, but this book has been pouring out of me, and so I know that people are going to enjoy reading it. There's just an energy I could feel when I'm typing that I think sort of transfers over to the reader.
Oh, that sounds great. Because I was sort of joking earlier when I said maybe when he means the whole thing, he means your book. I must
Yeah.
say, if I was Rory McIlroy and I had read your Mickelson book and you came over to me and said, "Great news, I'm writing a book about you," I would be thinking, "What?" So, how does he feel about it all?
Yeah, that's a natural reaction. I get that, and I had a bunch of conversations with Sean O'Flaherty, his agent, and you know, he, he basically from the beginning, their stance was, well, if it's not our book, we're not sure we want to participate. And I understand that. The two things that Rory would care about are money and control, and I'm offering neither one. And so, um, for a guy who gets paid, however many millions of dollars a day for a corporate outing, does he want to donate the time to me to a project over which he has no editorial control? Like, I understand the reticence. I'm not naive. Um, but as I told Rory and as I told Sean, it's like, Nicholas and Palmer, there's been dozens and dozens of books written about them through the years, and they always sat with their biographers. They weren't getting paid, they had no editorial control, but they understood the value of burnishing their own legend, fact checking every story, putting their spin on everything, trying to charm the writer. Like, um, that was their attitude, and that's part of why these books had a certain tone of hagiography, like, because they the force of their personality and the grace they showed in the process of doing these books comes through. And I said, so, books are forever. And um, Rory loves to read, he loves the game's history. Like, I thought that in the end he might find that seductive, like, to be part of this incredible literary tradition. um, but he was unmoved. And we actually had a conversation in the parking lot at Oakmont on Sunday
Okay.
that was really fascinating. I got to save it for the book,
Okay.
but it was such a reveal. A lot of things were revealed. I'll say that, and it was it told me so much about Rory, and it was very helpful for the book. But so yeah, I don't think I'm going to be getting any extensive sit down interviews. I mean, I got him one on one after he won at Pebble Beach, and for a little bit, and you know, I'll be at Portrush, I'll be at the Ryder Cup. You know, I'm always around. And I'm talking to everybody. So, um, and I at this point I've read literally thousands of interview transcripts of Rory through the years. I've listened to every podcast. I've read hundreds, maybe thousands of newspaper and magazine stories. Like his voice is well represented in the book
Good.
because he's
Yeah.
such a good talker and he
Yeah.
has been forever. So um, it's fine. And I kind of told him, you know, I'm good either way. If you don't want to talk, that's fine. It almost frees me up in certain ways. But of course, I would rather get his thoughts, but it's really not necessary for a project like this because he's had such a public life, and I'm getting everybody else. So, um, yeah, I think your listeners will really enjoy this book. When it comes out in March, after you have a chance to read it, we can revisit
Oh
all of
yeah,
this. And
that'd be great. Yeah, come back on.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and he is such an interesting dude. It's funny when you what pops in your head when you were saying there all the many gazillions of podcasts and interviews he's done. I suddenly had a flashback to like when he's reviewing Succession with the no laying up guys, you know, and
yeah,
like even I always remember the line he had in that one where they said to him like, "What have you taken from this whole series? Like, you know, this huge thing," and he was like, "Well, not verbatim, but well, I have a daughter and she's got a really rich father, and I need to make sure she does not turn out like that." And not all of us can have that
yeah.
perspective on the show, but I thought it was a good line.
That was a great line. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, Rory's been the most accessible superstar ever. You know, that's an example of it. He was just a fan of the show. He knew these guys are fans. He wanted somebody to talk about it with, and there he was doing a podcast about secession. Like it was great. People loved that stuff, and
Yeah.
there's thousands of examples like that. You know, he's been such an open book, and um, that's why people adore him. And so that's why the last few months have been so quizzical. But um, yeah, that's a huge part of the Rory McIlroy brand is as trying to the down to earth superstar, you know, the human superstar, and I think all of us hope he doesn't lose that
Mm.
because then he loses some of his appeal. There's plenty of remote superstars or prickly superstars. You know, we know them in golf. I mean, the irony is his two favorite players growing up were Nick Faldo and Tiger Woods. I mean, those are very prickly personalities, and I think Rory took from that. I want to be different, but he's trending in that direction all of a sudden. And so, can he reverse course? I mean, I like your optimism. I
Oh yeah,
probably agree with
I'd be
it,
sure.
but
Yeah,
it's gonna be interesting to see.
yeah. That's so interesting. I didn't know that was all coming. Brilliant. Well, best of luck with it, Alan Shibnook. Pleasure. Thank you so much for popping on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.